Washing dishes in the bathtub. How I conquered one more challenge of living alone. A story by Bev Potter, who you'll find on medium.com. It all started when I needed a hammer. Why I needed a hammer is not important. Sometimes you just need to hit things. Now, my hammer, which I love above all my tools because it was left by a handyman who never returned to claim it, and it's much, much better than any hammer I have previously owned, and to this day the guy is probably like, "Man, I wish I knew where I left that hammer. It was such a great hammer," was under the kitchen sink. So I reached under the sink and I grabbed my hammer. It was wet. Hammers shouldn't be wet. I can't imagine any scenario in which you would need a wet hammer. My hammer, along with other assorted accoutrements, lives in a bucket under my sink, and thank you, baby Jesus, for the bucket. Because when I actually bent down and looked, there was about 3 inches of nasty, weird-colored water in said bucket. God only knows how long it had been there. Months? Years? Decades? I wish I could say I was smart enough to always keep a bucket under my questionable plumbing, but it was sheer luck, which has now become a life tenet. Always keep a bucket under your sink. Grabbing the world's cheapest flashlight, because I'm too cheap to buy a really good flashlight, I followed the pipes up to the underside of the sink basin and saw that, for some unknown reason, the 20-year-old gaskets, which prevent water from leaking out of your sink, were crusted and cracked and wet. It wasn't a big leak. It was a leak I could live with. That's why God invented buckets. But I thought, and this is where everything always goes horribly wrong, the thinking. Maybe just this one cross pipe is clogged, and if I clean it out, it will stop leaking. So I took off one length of PVC pipe. Not a big deal. No tools required. And yes, it was very unspeakably, hideously clogged. Words cannot express my horror. I flushed the pipe out in the bathtub and popped it back in. Bada bing, bada boom. And then I thought, see what I mean? Maybe I should get my little as seen on TV plastic snake and poke it down the drain from the top. Maybe that section of pipe is clogged too. So I shoved the crooked plastic snake down the drain, and when I pulled it back out, the entire drain assembly came with it, and I was looking at the bucket through a giant hole in the bottom of my sink. Well, crap. I can't imagine why the 20-year-old plumber's putty holding the whole thing together couldn't withstand the force of being yanked straight up. So there I was with a gaping hole in one side of my sink and a decrepit, crusty kitchen sink drain assembly, bearing in mind I didn't even know those words at the moment, staring at me and asking a lot of questions I couldn't answer, like, "Okay, tool girl, now what are you going to do?" And of course it's Saturday because everything bad happens on the weekend. It's just a rule of the universe. And it's all because I can't just leave well enough alone. I always have to be messing with something. Son of a... But I still had one side of the sink I could use. My favorite side was decimated, but the side I didn't like, you know what I'm talking about, was pristine. And there was always the bathtub. I'm sure plenty of people do not wash dishes in the bathtub. But no, my OCD was never in a billion years going to let me just walk away from that broken sink and go on with my life. It was all I could think about. So, as God intended, I started Googling and learned words like kitchen sink drain assembly and locking nut. I then watched a YouTube video about plumber's putty, of which I have an irrational fear. Like, you're telling me Play-Doh is going to stop water from pouring into my basement? Sure it is. The key to DIY projects is A, curiosity, B, a belief in yourself, and C, desperation. On this particular Saturday, I hadn't washed my hair in, probably a week, and I was wearing what I think of as my cow milking clothes, even though I don't have any cows. It's just what I imagine I would wear if I had to roll out of bed at 3 a.m. every morning to milk cows. So, motivated by parsimony and pig-headedness, I ventured forth looking like a peasant woman in the 1600s going to market. All I needed to complete the picture was a goat. The man at the village hardware store gathered together everything I would need and called out a cheerful, "We're open till 5:30, as I left. Thanks for the encouragement. Thus determined not to go back to the hardware store for any reason, I looked at the directions on the packages. I looked at the carcass of my old drain assembly. I lost the clear. Why clear? Why? Plastic gaskets over and over and over, despite my stern instructions to myself to remember where I put the gaskets. I sawed at the new length of PVC pipe too much because, hello, perfectionist, which just made things worse. And then I chased a leak for 5 hours because I didn't have what I really needed, which was a third arm. Fortunately, I had 4 rolls of plumber's tape on hand because I thought I was buying 1 roll on Amazon, but it was 1 package of 4 rolls. See how they are? And now I have enough plumber's tape to last me a lifetime. Or at this rate, maybe not. Anyway, between the plumber's tape and Jenga-ing bottles of cleaning products to support the cross pipe while I goofed around with tightening the new tailpiece to the sink, I stopped the leak. In the end, the only tools I needed that I didn't buy at the hardware store were channel locks, my dad's, and I will cherish them forever, plumber's tape, a small hacksaw, more patience than it seems reasonable for one person to have. The total price? $20. I can't even remember why I needed the hammer. Thanks so much for listening to this story by Bev Potter. I love narrating these stories. So please, if you enjoyed this story, tell your friends about my YouTube channel and this podcast. I'd love for more people to hear these fantastic stories.